there, my name is Bobby Sass, also known as Inga, and I'd like to welcome you to the very beginning series of The Joys of Electronics. And today's first lesson is all about soldering, so let's get crazy. Now before we get started, I like to make sure we cover a few safety basics to make sure we only have little happy accidents, not some big ones. Now pay attention carefully. Rule number 1. Before you turn on your soldering station, make sure that you have it in a proper placement so it doesn't burn a hole in your table or set the house on fire. Rule number 2. Never touch anything that's shiny on this. Make sure your hands always stay below the handle point or else you're going to get seriously burned. Rule number 3. Make sure you have some form of ventilation to make sure you don't breathe in any of those toxic fumes. Rule number 4. If you have to leave your workstation, always turn it off so you don't leave it on. Rule number 5. Make sure that your workstation is clean before you start working and after you work. And then when you finish working, make sure you wash your hands so you don't get any of that residue onto your body.
Rule number 6
is to have fun learning. And in case you forget these safety basics, my friend Tyler has made a cheat sheet for soldering. Now when I solder, I like to do some little pre-cuts. These pre-cuts make it a lot more easier for working when soldering because at least you won't have this big thing holding you down, kind of like problems in life that we overthink. This will be able to make it easier to pinpoint little things that we could fix in detail. Now when it comes to setting heat for your soldering station, make sure you check what type of soldering wire you have. If it's lead free, it might have different temperatures. I like keeping it at a solid 350 Celsius or 675. Sometimes you might need it hotter, sometimes you might need it cooler. All depends on what you're working on. Now this is a perf board. A perf board is a perforated board, as you can see, that has many little holes and pads on it. And this is what you use for a THT connection, which is through hole connection. And this is where you put your resistors, you bend it on the other side or any other components, and you solder it on one side and the other side shows exposed. And there's another one called an SMD, which is a surface mount pad. And this is the two little square pads on this side, which will require a little bit different soldering, but not too much different. Now we're going to start off with this one. Before you start soldering, you're going to want to make sure that you tin the tip a little bit for the soldering iron. This makes it a lot more easier to make solder go onto the pieces that you're going to be working with. It's going to smoke up a little bit, but that's just fine. Now with this resistor, I'm going to bend the leads, which are these metal parts, and put it through the hole here. Once I have it through, I'm going to go ahead and I'm going to turn out the other side. Once you have the resistor in, you're going to bend out the leads at a 45-degree angle to make sure it doesn't move out of place. And this is where we're going to start soldering. Here I'll be using a flux pen. This is one of my little favorite things to do because it makes sure that the solder goes on strictly to where it needs to go. Once we have the flux on, we're going to heat up the pad just a little bit. You can hear a little sizzle. And then we're going to add the solder on. And look at that, it's going to melt on just nicely. And we want it to look just like that, or just like a little cone. We're going to do it again. Hear that sizzle? Very peaceful. Now, this is exactly what we don't want to happen. We had our first little happy accident. Now, that could be because of adding too much flux where I added it to bubble. And if you saw that the last thing that I did is that I had held on the soldering gun a little bit too much longer on it than it should have, and it led to all that bubbling and excessive oxidization. Now, it could have been a lot more worse if you could see here. This is a terrible example. Well, no, actually it's a great example for how you shouldn't solder. When you get it looking like this, that means you should stop and then try connect it to somewhere else. And if you can't tell what you're doing exactly wrong, I definitely recommend you take a screenshot of this so you'll be able to tell if you have too much solder, not enough, or what you did wrong and how to fix it. And that concludes our first lesson. I hope that it was very helpful and informative for you guys. The main aspect for me was your safety and your joy of learning. So if it's too short, too long, feel free to let me know. I appreciate y'all.